So the first one is a very obvious one, which is that of cost. A number of and costs come not just the fixed costs of hosting an application, right? So often you have applications that run on on-premise servers or on dedicated data centers. These are applications that have been running for a while. There are costs that are associated with maintaining and keeping these applications running, right? So the infrastructure costs, you've got to pay for hardware, you've got to keep it up to date, you've got to make sure that it is secure. There are application costs itself, where when you're using legacy software, you need to make sure that it remains secure, especially customer-facing software, that we keep things patched. The costs start mounting up when the underlying infrastructure that is used, so it could be an operating system, it could be a library, it could be an application framework that is no longer supported, or or has very expensive support for things like patching and security fixes and so on. So those costs all add up. So we often work with clients who have applications that, while they're revenue generating, while they're profitable, and while they have users, the future is very challenging because they might be using an underlying technology or framework that is no longer supported by the vendor, or the vendor has a very expensive support plan in place, saying that, hey, there's very few people who are using this framework. If you want support from a security perspective, then we're going to have to charge you extra because we need to keep the people who know this on staff and continue to support it. Similarly, there might be situations where the rest of the application or rest of the IT infrastructure has moved on to being on the cloud, or new applications are being developed to be cloud native. So all of your operation budget is sort of going towards supporting these new generation of applications. And now you need to make sure from an operations and infrastructure perspective that you can continue to support on-premise or dedicated data center deployments, right? So it might be different skill sets that are required. It might be different tooling and monitoring that is required. You might need to have very specific run books for your support staff in order to deal with an on-premise deployment. Things become even more difficult when you have applications that you have deployed to your customers' data centers or to your customers' premises. So instead of having a SaaS, a software as a service application that you deploy to your cloud infrastructure, which then your customers use, you are deploying these artifacts or applications to your customer's data center. And that suddenly you have an ask from the customer saying, hey, we no longer want to maintain this. We are moving towards a SaaS model. Your application needs also to be delivered in the same manner because we no longer want to pay for our own operations or infrastructure staff, right? So although we often think about new functionality or what technology can enable in terms of new functionality, often the challenges are that people are quite happy using the legacy application. They have years of training, they have years of documentation, but the underlying infrastructure and operational complexities often drive a need for rewriting, refactoring, or moving an application. Sometimes the simplest thing might be to move an existing application from a dedicated infrastructure, lift and shift it to the cloud. That in itself is an application modernization type project. So that is one dimension, dimension of cost and risk that we often think about.